There we go. All right. And we're going to double check this. Vios, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good, good. Let me go ahead and clock you in for the day. There you go. All right. Let me pull up my couple decks of slides here. If you remember, I got to run two of them in order for Zoom and you guys to both have everything. Okay, so this week we're going to be really digging into what is owed. And let me get this set up here. And what is owed? What do employees owe to the company? All right. When you agree to be employed somewhere, you're agreeing to do it as a number of things. And there is some legalities to it. And then there's also ethics. And since this class really is the intersection of ethics and legality, it is incumbent on us to make sure we cover those. Let me log in one more of our students here that showed up online. There we go. I got you, Enos. And get this. There we go. All right. So Byers and Stanbury, the authors of your textbook, they discussed what employees owe to their employer. And these include loyalty to the organization. In other words, you're not walking around town bad-mouthing the company or talking to the customers or suppliers and bad-mouthing the company. That happens more often than you realize at work, but you're not supposed to be doing it. It's expected that you don't do that. You should be loyal to the organization. After all, they hired you. They're paying your check. They're paying you a paycheck. And if you get benefits, those cost money. Health insurance, dental insurance, 401k, the company has to spend money on those. And so they're spending money on you. They're investing into you to do work, and they want loyalty. Now, you also need to remain loyal to the customers. When I've been in retail, I wouldn't tell the customers coming into the store, you need to go to this store who are a competitor. I'm not going to do that. Now, if I know another one of our locations has what they're looking for, I would recommend they go to that location, or I'd arrange to have the item sent over. You also need to maintain financial integrity. When you are processing the day's profits, the earnings for the store, you've got to account for literally every penny. It's not yours. If you take a penny from the drawer, that is stealing. Okay, it's not yours. You didn't earn it. You're not supposed to be doing that. It's illegal. And so they want financial integrity. Now, if you're more than a clerk, if you're a manager, that level of financial integrity actually begins to increase. Because now, instead of just dealing with one cash register, you're dealing with all of the profit for the store from that day, and you've got to make sure it gets to the bank. If you're the regional manager or higher, you're dealing with even more financial accountability. So the higher up you go, the more accountable you have to be. And you need to remain ethical when offering criticism or engaging in whistleblowing. And we're going to talk about those today because we sometimes think that if I go online and I rant and rave about my boss, my employer, I'm whistleblowing. No, that is not whistleblowing. There's a very specific set of criteria that goes into whistleblowing, and it is protected legally. Okay. But in offering criticism, if you're talking to the employer and you're offering criticism, make sure it's constructive, not destructive. Destructive criticism is very negative and will seriously impact your employment. Now, when you're giving positive, constructive criticism, you want to do so in a way that helps build that employer up, not tear them down. When I was in the military, we learned that you could tell somebody in your chain of command, like your captain or your first sergeant, literally anything. It was all in how you told them it. If you did it wrong, it came across negative and that you're attacking them. If you did it right, then they accepted it right. So there's always going to be a right way to do things. Loyalty to the employer. Byers and Stanbury pointed out that many employees never signed a contract detailing the duties and loyalty expected of them by their employer. How many people have had a job where you literally signed an employment contract? I have, but not everybody has. Most jobs out there, you're not going to have a contract. You go get a job at McDonald's or in retail, you're not going to have an employment contract. You have an agreement. Okay, fine, you're hired. They put you on the payroll, send you through training, and now you're an employee there. However, the law is a series of common law provisions that govern these very issues. Common law is kind of unique. It's covered by the law, kind of, sort of, in a way, if that makes sense. It's something that, well, we've always done it this way before. It's what's accepted throughout our society, throughout our country, our government. And so we accept it as common law. For instance, my second wife and I, we're not married, but we were married. We were common law married. We actually lived together. We had bills together in both of our names, and we decided to go to the courthouse, and they did some paperwork and said, here you go. After they saw the proof that we were both on the bills and the bank accounts, we were common law married. But the ironic part is, let's say she and I didn't go to the courthouse and do that. And she decided that she wanted to get half of everything I have and was going to divorce me. If I'm on the accounts with her, we're common law married. If we've lived in the same place for 6 months together, we're common law married. She could take me to court and divorce me, even though we had never been married. That's the way common law works. Okay. Now that I've given you that little preview of common law, we're going to continue. Duty of loyalty requires that employees conduct their tasks in a way that is in the business's and the employer's best interests. When you work for your employer, you need to work in a way and function in a way that is literally in the best interest for them and that company. You are an employee. This common law provision is in all 50 U.S. states. Now, when we talk about a lot of the legal things, we're talking here in the United States, because this is the area that I'm aware of, and then I know, and that the authors of the book also were writing about. I don't know how it is in other countries. If you go back there, make sure you follow the laws of that country. That's very important. So, duty of loyalty. Duty of loyalty refers to how an employee must act in good faith, meaning that they act in ways that benefit the business and or the employer. So if you're acting in good faith, you're seeking the best interest of your employer and that business. The textbook stated, the duty of loyalty means an employee is obligated to render loyal and faithful service to the employer, to act with good faith and not compete with, but rather to advance the employer's interests. So when I work for a company here at, let's say, Cleary, I'm not trying to ruin their interests. I'm not doing things that are contrary to their mission and their vision. What I'm doing is in concert with their mission and vision, with their values, their core values. I come here, I leave my own personal hat at home, and I put on a Cleary hat. That's how it is when we work. We are now in that employee. Now, you might sit there and say, this almost sounds like a form of slavery. Well, people have made that analogy that you go to work, you do your job, and you have to do everything they say, and you got to be obedient and loyal to them. And this, yes, but you agree to be there of your own volition, your own free will, and you're getting compensation for it. Slavery doesn't have those. Okay, so this is something where we willingly put ourselves in this position of servitude as an employee, but we're getting something from it. And if you take organizational behavior class in there, or at least the one I teach, I talk about the expectancy theory of motivation. I do things at my job in the expectation of getting my paycheck. Most people are motivated, at least at work, through that theory. They do their tasks because they want that paycheck. This implies that the employee will not act in ways that benefit their own personal agenda. Rather, it's the agenda of the employer. So here, I'm an adjunct professor. I'm not trying to advance my interests. I'm not trying to advance my research. I'm not trying to advance my plan for my life. Rather, what's the plan for Cleary University? And how do I know what that is? Well, my supervisor, the dean, we talk. Matter of fact, that's why I was a little late. I was talking to the dean. I talk to the dean on a regular basis. I talk to other members of the senior leadership. Okay. And I'm able to find out what it is that the school is working towards as an organization. And then I work in concert with that. Duty of loyalty even prohibits employees from obtaining additional employment unless it has been approved by their employer. At most jobs, you cannot take a second job unless you get approved by your first job. That goes back to the duty of loyalty. Now, most places will say, no, not a problem. Why is that? Why would they even want to know or care? They want to make sure that you're not working for a competitor, that you're not divulging what gives them the competitive advantage and giving it to someone else. They're making sure that any of the proprietary secrets remain in that organization. And when I say proprietary secrets, chemical compounds, the way something is engineered, patents, etc. Okay. Industrial espionage is a real thing. Spies in various industries that are out there. They're there to figure out why that company is succeeding, what they're doing, and then take that and they sell it to another company. Okay. This may seem unfair, but it is designed to protect the employer from paying staff with selfish motives or providing service to a competitor. You don't want to train somebody at any cost. And training is not cheap when you train an employee, especially the more technical something is or the more advanced the job is. You don't want to spend all that time and effort training that person to have them go use that skill somewhere else, because you're not getting the best return on your investment at that point. This is the reduce any conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest is I work for Samsung. I'm in one of their etching departments or one of their fabs producing semiconductors. I also go get a job at Motorola, working in a very similar fab. A fab is a fabrication unit. Okay. Now there's a conflict of interest because Samsung and Motorola might be in competition, or maybe it better be Samsung and Intel because they both make semiconductors. So if I'm working at both Samsung and Intel, now there's a conflict of interest. If I work for Bank A and then I go get a second job at Bank B, there's a conflict of interest. So that opens up a series of ethical and legal challenges. And so just avoid it. Employees should never make work decisions to further their own goals. If I make a decision, I'm not here at my job, I'm not going to do it for my betterment. I'm going to say to myself, what is going to help the organization, in this case, Cleary University, in its mission and vision? And ideally, what is it going to do to help my students? Because the Cleary's mission and vision is all about you guys. And so I need to make decisions in a way that benefit you, the main shareholder, the stakeholders, the organization. And you know what? I do get benefited, but that's not the reason I do it. I get the reward of knowing that I've helped students understand something. I get the reward of knowing that I've done the best I could in presenting a lecture of a very complex subject or something like that. That's my reward. And that's good enough for me. That's more than good enough for me. And I do get compensated financially, but I'm not making decisions only for my agenda. This is, okay, where were we at? Employees must never deal with or make agreements with any clients, customers, suppliers, or vendors for their own personal gain. The reason for that is that supplier, vendor, customer, client goes to the organization that you're working for. They are dealing with that organization. That organization is either paid by them or they paid them for something. There is an agreement of this, there's an agreed upon contract between these individuals, these entities. If I start making agreements with the suppliers, vendors, customers, clients, I'm taking away from that agreement and that relationship they have with the organization. Not a wise thing to do. Also very unethical. It is important to point out that the level of duty and loyalty is directly related to the level of trust given to the employee by the employer. The more trust you are given by your employer, the greater the duty of loyalty that you owe them. So if I get hired to just be a groundskeeper, my duty of loyalty, just basic, minimal, average. But if I'm hired as a security guard, it increases. If I'm hired as an administrator, even more so. The duty of loyalty I owe as a professor is quite great because I'm working with the direct people this organization is set here to be for. So I'm not working on anything for my personal life in interacting with you. No, 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 no. Rather, what's going to better you, what's going to better the organization, that's my focus. So I feel I've got a pretty large duty of loyalty because I'm working with the whole reason this place is even here, the students. According to Byers and Stanbury, this includes confidentiality and fiduciary duty. Confidentiality is I'm not going to go blabbing about anything that my organization does. There are some exceptions to that when they're violating the law, but we'll get to those in a minute. The fiduciary duty, fiduciary, it's a hard word to say, fiduciary duty means financial. So this is if I am required to handle money, every cent that comes to that organization is going to go to that organization through me. They want to make sure I'm not filling my pockets from the till. Since the duty of loyalty is under common law, there is no codified definition. So we can't turn to the laws of the state of Michigan or the laws of the United States and have a definition of what duty of loyalty is. The duty of loyalty has changed with each generation that comes into the workplace. Think about that. It really goes back to how that generation and society as a whole is thinking ethically and legally at that time period. The duty of loyalty 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 100 years ago was different than it is today. We live in a different time. Each generation lives in a different time period. Therefore, society is different. So the duty of loyalty does shift and change. Ultimately, the definition has to do with how the employee places the needs and desires of the employer. Do they place them above themselves or below themselves? Are they striving for their own selfish agenda or are they working for the organization's agenda? Loyalty is a two-way street here, though. Loyalty must be both from the employee to the employer and from the employer to the employee. But what does this look like in an at-will employment within an at-will employment jurisdiction? At-will employment, we talked about, I want to say, was it week 8, just before spring break, means that I apply for a job. If I get hired, I'm hired at will. I stay there at will. They retain me at will. Now, there are some things when it comes to terminating me, they can't just, oh, bye. They have to have specific reasons, but it's still at will. But I can go bye at any moment. That's at will. Byers and Stanbury pointed out that the at-will employment system is normally designed to benefit the employer. Employees who feel respected and trusted by their employer tend to offer a higher level of loyalty. Not to mention, crossing back over to organizational behavior for a moment, if you have employees that feel respected and trusted and valued, they're going to be motivated, engaged, and highly productive. That's what you want. Now, some organizations don't provide trust and loyalty to their employees, and their people keep leaving. The first people to leave in an organization that is starting to mess this area up are your high performers. Why? Because they know they can get a job somewhere else. The low performers know that they can't, so they hold on as long as possible. So what happens is you have a migration of your top talent out of your company, and you're left with those who underachieve. Do you think your organization is going to retain any competitive advantage at that point? No. Let's look at how money changes loyalty. Buyers at Stanbury noted that the duty of loyalty tends to shift when money is brought into the discussion. In other words, when staff witness senior leaders quitting their jobs to work for a competitor just to earn more money, they often do the same. You may have heard the expression, the rats are jumping ship. You got the rats and they're leaving the ship. Why? Well, the rats are the first ones to get out of there because if the situation's bad and they're not able to flourish, they're going to go find someplace else that does. So when the rats in the organization, the senior leadership, the ones that are leaving out of there are going, everyone else is going to go, hey, we need to hit the road too. It's time to go. We can witness this both in the business sector and in the sports sector. In past times, people had a high level of loyalty, remained with the same company for their entire career. They would work there 30, 40 years. They'd retire and get a gold watch, have their pension. It's not like that nowadays. It hasn't been for a few decades. There we go. Now employees tend to be more mobile and they change jobs every couple of years. So there's been a change in how employees work for their companies. That has changed the duty of loyalty. Now, instead of being loyal to the organization throughout my entire career, I'm loyal to that organization while I work there. But we have to ask the question, this is a philosophy class. If the workforce is more mobile nowadays, and they're leaving from one company to another, they only stay at a job for a couple of years and hit the road, how loyal are they going to be during those years? If we see something as disposable or easily changed, we don't really value it as much. So I think we might see the duty of loyalty has decreased in this mobile employee environment. I'm not saying it's a bad thing that we have a mobility in our careers now. I'm just saying I think it's affected the duty of loyalty. Buyers at Stanbury defined the duty of confidentiality, that's what we're going to talk about now, as keeping company secrets from competitors. This includes any trade secrets, proprietary blends of chemicals, ways of manufacturing processes. These are secrets that belong to that organization. It's what helps them obtain and hold on to their competitive advantage. This can be legally enforced through non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. And sometimes a confidentiality clause is included in a person's employment contract. So if you do have an employment contract, look to see if there's a confidentiality clause. Because if so, and you violate that, they legally can come after you. And if you sign a non-disclosure agreement, they legally can come after you. But you might ask, what about whistleblowers? We'll talk about them in a moment. One example that the textbook gives deals with the copyrights. They belong to the employer even for an employee's work. When I write curriculum for Clarita University, it becomes the property of the school. This last summer, I wrote a course for them. It's not mine. I spent, 2 months working on it? It's 30, 40 pages? It's not mine. It belongs to the school. They hired me to do it. Now they own it. That's okay. When we work for a company and we develop a new process, we write something, we come up with an idea, and it's accepted and used in that company, it belongs to that company. Some people have taken it a little extreme. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb. Everybody likes to say he did. He didn't. One of his employees did. And he took their idea and said, it's mine. That is this concept at work. Now, ultimately, that individual could have worked on the project themselves in their garage, patented it themselves. Then Thomas Edison would have to purchase it from them. But if they use the laboratory at the facility and the equipment and the materials, it belongs to the company. But when I write material on my own, that belongs to me. So when I do something on my own, in my own home, on my own computer, using my own programs, using resources that I have access to personally. Now it's mine. I can sell it. I can keep it. I can delete it.
So every assignment that we do for like projects, if you, does it belong to us if you?
Now that's a little different. You're not doing work for the school.
Okay,
That's homework.
okay.
Okay. That's part of the educational process. When I write curriculum, I'm given, this is what we want. They give me a contract. They say, you're going to do this, 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 and this. I do it. I get paid. I give them the product. And so, yes.
You said this is like probably about school, so, but still, could you still use like what you did for the school as like, for like the credentials, like basically like advertising yourself for like a.
Oh, yeah.
Like, bigger job?
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't have the item itself.
Yeah.
So like if somebody says, because a lot of times as a professor, when you're out job hunting, they say, well, have you written curriculum? Yes. Now I can't just give them that curriculum. It belongs to the school. But I can say I wrote such and such a curriculum for the school during this time
And
period.
they can look it up.
They can call, they can talk to people and verify it, stuff like that. But it's not like I can say, here, take a look at this. And they look through the manual and they go, oh, okay. They look at the book. Oh, okay, whatever. No, I can use it on my credentials because it's something I did, but I don't own it. I own the fact that I did it, but I don't own the actual end item itself. Patents. This is also true of patents. Patents, copyrights, any sort of intellectual property that an employee works on belongs to that organization. Let's say I work for a recording music distributor or a recording artist distributor or management company, but I, on my own time, write music. It doesn't belong to the company. That belongs to me. I'm on my own time using my own equipment. It belongs to me. And your homework is not property of the school. That's your homework that you did, that you turned in to get a grade. Okay. That's all that is. So it's a little different because I don't think I have to explain too much. I think you understand how it's different. Duty of confidentiality. We're going to continue here. Ways to protect the organization's secrets include non-disclosure agreements or NDAs, non-compete agreements. These are designed to protect the organization's intellectual property. Is this ethical? Byers and Stanberry presented the ethical questions surrounding this particular discussion. In some U.S. jurisdictions, such as California, they have enacted legislation voiding non-compete agreements and limiting the duration of such agreements. In other words, these aren't all valid in every state. In some states, if you try to do an NDA, there's a limit of maybe 10 years on it, or there are certain limiters upon it. It's not for your lifetime in some jurisdictions. For the non-compete, if I signed a non-compete agreement with Clear University, then I could never work for another university ever again in my life, even if I'm not employed here. So sometimes we need things like non-disclosure agreements, non-compete agreements, but I do think having a limit on them is wise. But now we got to go back and say non-disclosure agreement would cover this. If I work on material for the school and it's covered under an NDA, after the 10 years, if the NDA expires after 10 years, can I now take that material and go sell it to another school? No. Because the school literally owns the property. They paid me for it. They took ownership. I sold it to them. So you're not going to be able to take things you work on in that company after the NDA expires and go sell them somewhere else. Okay, because they literally own the patent on it at that point. The question revolves around when does the duty of the duty of confidentiality cease? When does it stop? Does it stop when I die? Does it stop when I leave the company? Does it stop when I retire? Well, I think we really got to consider what is being held confidential. When I was in the Army, I worked in military intelligence. I was a sergeant for a recon team. And anything I received that was considered classified, which was minimal, but anything I did receive that was classified, it's classified for the rest of my life. But when I worked at the sheriff's department, anything that was confidential really isn't confidential anymore. It's kind of like you got to look at the magnitude of what you're working with. One deals with national security, the other one may have dealt with just, I mean, there are some things, the inmates, their names, the names of the patients I've had when I was in the medical field, those I need to hold confidential because they're ethical. That's ethical. But the fact that I worked there and the things that I did and the processes we used, that's not held confidential anymore. That's long in the past. And so, really, you got to ethically look at each one of these. I'd say a general rule of thumb is as follows: if it feels funny in your gut, don't do it. If you're sitting there saying, well, I know this from that company, I'm working for one of their competitors now, years later, do I share this information with them? If you're asking that question, probably shouldn't share it. Just because it's the wise thing, because now